Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for tuning in to tonight's live stream. Sorry we were a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties with StreamYard. My name is Todd Schull. I'm the lead learner at the South Carolina Education Association Center for Educator Wellness and Learning, and we provide a whole host of professional learning resources. You can head on over to our website at cool.us. That's CEWL.us. I'll put the website up there. And on that website, you can search for all of the live streams that we do. We embed those on the website, and you can check out past offerings that we've had. There's also a form on the homepage. And if your school or district would like some free professional learning, all you have to do is fill out that form. An email gets sent to me, and we'll get back to you within about 2 to 3 business days to try to coordinate with you on setting up some free professional learning at your school or district. All brought to you by the SCEA and our Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. So excited about tonight's guest. He is a colleague of mine and someone who I deeply, deeply respect, who's done amazing work and is very, very conscious about liberatory design and just social justice. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring on Albert Jones. Albert, how are you doing tonight?
I'm well. It's been a busy day, but we are doing well doing this work, and I appreciate being here with everybody this evening.
Awesome. So, tonight's session really is about using the power of your voice and advocating. And of course, we talk about that a lot. But I feel like your voice is so powerful. I think what you have to say and what you've done to lead help lead our organization, some of our aspiring educators, our early career educators. You came out of the classroom and went and came to work here at the SCEA. Can you talk a little bit about that transition and what drew you to this line of this work in particular at the SCEA?
Yeah, so for a lot of individuals, like Todd mentioned, Albert Jones, I taught here in Columbia, elementary ed major. And so I kind of got involved by accident. A member kind of recruited me into the SCEA. And then I started coming to some local meetings. And before I knew it, I was an elected officer. And then from there, I started to do some things statewide, started to attend some national events. And so from there, opportunity kind of presented itself, and I took it as an opportunity to really tap into doing the work of advocacy, doing the work of organizing, and really supporting our members across the state. So this is going into year 2 within this role, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity to really work with our members, work with our education employees. And it's really one of those stories of kind of homegrown and understanding South Carolina.
Yeah, and one of the things I know that you're proud of is just the explosion and growth of our student the SCEA. Can you talk a little bit about our student SCEA?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really, really proud of is that an election season just wrapped up. And for the first time in a while, the student SCEA will have some state officers that really will man this program, our aspiring educator program, which is anyone who's going into a pre-service program in order to become an educator. And so we really look forward to their leadership. You have some folks coming from some HBCUs, as well as the College of Charleston, and then the HBCU is the South Carolina State University. So it's really been a program that I've really been proud of. They've really engaged and leaned into the work of advocacy, the work of really supporting educators and really leading the way right from where they are. We had Lobby Day about a couple weeks ago, and we had folks from College of Charleston and the University of South Carolina and Winthrop University. So that's Rock Hill, that's Charleston, that's Columbia, all there at the Capitol, having conversations with their elected officials and really engaging in that process of education. And so it really has been a really value-added piece for our aspiring educators, and I'm really, really proud of their work and their leadership.
Yeah, and that's so critical that our young people entering the profession have that leadership mindset and have that mindset of being activists and being involved in using their voice in advocacy for the profession. Because I think too many times people go into the profession think they can close their doors and someone else will figure out all that stuff for them.
Yeah, that's a big one. We talk a lot about how they're immersing themselves in right now in pedagogy and instruction and teaching and learning and data collection, but the reality is the business of education the politics of education are still occurring. And so they have to engage in the whole pie, and understanding that, if you're not in the room, if you're not making your voice heard, if you're not working together collectively, these decisions are still happening. They can either happen with you or they can happen to you.
100%. Well, are you ready to dive into your presentation?
I am. Yeah, let's jump in.
All
So
right.
when we tap into your voice, our power, advocacy, and education, let's first of all just make sure we have a common definition of what advocacy is. So I'm going to use the traditional Merriam-Webster definition, which is the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. So when we're thinking about this, when we're framing kind of what we're doing, let's just kind of keep that in mind. So tapping in, let's see if my slideshow loading. So let's go ahead and just start off with a land acknowledgement. So we begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands served by the Cherokee people. That's where I am stationed, where my home is. We honor America's first people and all elders past, present, and emerging. And we are called on to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. We invite you to think about the spaces you are inhabiting and the indigenous people who came before them and were stewards of the land. So definitely tap in to wherever you're living, understand and know that some indigenous tribe lived there at some point. So before we even kind of tap in to what advocacy is, let's talk about why this conversation is even essential. First and foremost, I was an educator that kind of started off by closing my door and just doing my thing in the classroom. And so I kind of saw there were a lot of things happening, a lot of decisions that were going on. And I've always been, even as a child, the type of person who asks why. That's a question. I like a justification. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about. And so that's kind of where it came in. The other piece, when we talk about advocacy and why are we even having this conversation, when I say this, I don't say this lightly. I really believe that lives are at stake. And when we talk about the lives that are at stake, immediately you might think students, and that's true. However, you as education employees, your life is at stake as well. Your livelihood may be at stake. So it's important that you engage in this process, and hopefully there's some things that you kind of learn and pick up. So before tapping in, these are just some community agreements as we kind of navigate this presentation, this conversation. Feel free to take a moment to glance over those. I'll highlight two of them, one of which being is I want you to make sure that you're listening for understanding. And like I do, when I do this workshop, I always say there may be something that I say that you may have some internal conflict with. That's okay. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation, and I really welcome the opportunity to have discussion and dialogue around this. But I encourage you to really take some time and use that self-awareness and self-knowledge to kind of do some reflection. And the other piece, I'm going to ask that you seek discomfort, that number 7. So these are going to be some topics that you may not have considered, that may be some topics that may differ from you personally versus professionally, differ from the society versus you in your own home. So really lean into that discomfort, because that's where learning occurs. If you look at research and they talk about the brain, one of the statements that I learned a lot during my time in undergrad was, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. If you don't feel uncomfortable, that learning isn't taking place. So I would be remiss to talk about advocacy without talking about why we exist as the SCEA. We've been around for a very long time. I'm really doing the work of advocacy, organizing, supporting our members, really caring about 3 really large buckets: your wages or salary, your voice, and your time. Those are 3 things that we really feel very deeply about, and we have been doing that for a very long time. If you're on this page watching this live stream, you click probably the SCEA's page. So check out some of those resources on our website, on our social media, and things of that nature. So when we go in and we have a conversation about advocacy, we have to understand what power is. And so I'm not saying it in like the science term, but consider this definition. So when we talk about power, we talk about organized people and organized money. And so when we look at this graphic, you will see, a lot of little fish. And each of those individual fish by themselves are not much larger than than that one fish. But when they come together, when they work together, when they do the work of coming together collectively and I always say rowing in the same direction, you really have the opportunity to flex your power, build that power, and get those issues and get wins on those issues that are widely and deeply felt. So it's really important that you understand that this whole concept of advocacy is going to take collective action, and it's going to take people coming together and really rowing in the same direction. So we're going to dive in and talk a little bit more about advocacy and education. So disclaimer, you will not walk away from this and say, oh my goodness, I'm an advocacy specialist. I am going to know everything. I am going to be able to advocate on any issue. This is kind of to get your feet wet. The best growth opportunities when it comes to advocacy is experience. So the more you do it, the more familiar you come with it, that's going to be something that is going to really grow your ability to be an advocate in education. So let's tap in and talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So that's the mission at hand. We here at the SCEA really believe, and you know, that 87% of students go to public schools. That's what the statistics say. So we really believe if we're going to take care of the entire society, education is a people issue, not just an educator issue or not just a parent issue. That person who works at Zaxby's or Chick-fil-A or Burlington or anything of that sort or that nature was a student at one point. And so they really deserve to have equitable opportunities, equitable resources in order to be successful in life. And so we understand and we know that, and because it benefits the entire society, so it's important that we tap into those resources. And here's the question I get the most, but why me? You know, I signed up to be a teacher, not necessarily an advocate. Well, my answer to that is why not you? You are the individual that has 1 or 2 or 3 degrees in the profession of education. You are the expert. You are the one who spent the time, the resources, and it's so important that you put your voice in the room because you've literally studied it for a lot of your life. So it's important that you understand that you can't limit yourself by saying, I'm just a teacher, or I'm just a bus driver, or I'm just this, or I'm just that. You have to recognize and you have to understand, but by you being in that space, in that role, in that place, you are someone who lives and breathes this every day. So we believe, and I truly believe that I lean into what John Lewis says, which you have to make some good trouble, necessary trouble. It requires for you to get into the fight, for you to be aware of what's going on around you, and making sure that you engage. So when I talk about advocacy, and going back to that common definition, a lot of people think I am just talking about having a conversation with the president, the governor, or a state legislature. That's not necessarily the case. Advocacy looks different, and it isn't always happening on the grand scale. So if you look on that graphic, you see the work that you can do, even from a building level, is still significant. There was one time I remember having a conversation with a member, and it was about the car ride line. And so if you've been in elementary schools, you know that the car ride line is a thing. There are people who get in there like an hour or 2 ahead. And so one of the things that ended up happening was it just wasn't efficient. And so it was taking like 45 minutes to get through the car ride line. Through the work of like advocacy and not just complaining, but also offering solutions, you know, that member was able to make some changes. It wasn't anything that's like earth shattering, but thinking about your working conditions, something as simple as cutting down the time in your car ride line, opening and closing doors, can in the long term make a big difference. So it's important that you understand that like advocacy is not just that big statement piece. You'll see some videos in this presentation that are some more, you know, larger pieces to this, but understand that advocacy looks like the big and the small, you know, the huge ask and the little ask. And it only happens when you are intentional about paying attention to what's going on, that you're intentional about having conversations and building the relationships with the folks that are in positions of power or have that influence. So jumping in to some of the basics. And so I'll get to what's on the right hand of the screen, but on the left hand of the screen, these are just some of the basics of how would I go about advocating. you're going to want to make sure you understand some of the issues that are going on. You see our framing: together we're stronger, together we're heard. If you do things by yourself, if one person, if Todd or myself were to just say things by ourselves, it only goes so far. Todd knows a lot of people. I know a lot of people. However, we need a lot of people with us in order to impact and have the change we want. I'll talk a little bit more about the media piece in the next slide, but you're going to want to make sure that you engage with other stakeholders. And so that means you may need to kind of think about, this may be an educational related issue. However, it's important that you tap into the community around you. The folks that might work park and recreations, or the folks that might work in the local businesses. Understanding kind of who might also care about some of the issues that you were sharing is important for the success. We'll talk more about messaging as we continue, but you're going to want to make sure you're consistent and clear with what it is that you are saying. Follow through. That's huge. If you said you were going to do something, do it. And then also, in addition to reflect. So if it's a situation where there was some action, or you did have a conversation with someone, think about, did I get exactly what I thought? Did the person react? Kind of what went on there, and taking that time. Just like in your day job, if you're a classroom teacher or work in some sort of instructional capacity, you reflect about, your lessons, your instruction. The same thing would happen here. And then, of course, the last few ones would be, it's always a good time to advocate. It's not just when it's an election season or when something is wrong. There's always a good time to have those conversations and build that rapport and relationships. The next one means, which is hard for a lot of people, no means not now, not never. Think about, like, if you have children or if you work with children, and sometimes you may tell them no, but they clearly understand. That means not now. I'm going to ask you again in a couple minutes and see if that answer changes, or I'm going to figure out a way to kind of go around what's going on in order to kind of get what I want. And the last one, we got to vote in every election. Educators need to make sure that they're turning out to the polls, making their voice heard in that way. So we'll get to the right-hand side of the screen. Time traveling back to 2021, I was still a local officer in my local education association. And, pandemic had hit. There was a lot going on. A lot of school board meetings were a little contentious or strenuous. And so this word, and you see the tweet, was used in order to really describe the pandemic at the time. For me, I found it unacceptable. I found it disgusting. I found it something that was just not right. So for me, in my growth as in advocacy, I did not start there at what you're about to see, and I worked my way up and brought people along with me. I had an opportunity to speak at a school board meeting, and this was my conversation to them after this particular school board meeting. That we collectively allowed a constituent to spew racism from his lips across the world. And I mean the world, because once it hits the internet, it's there forever. I stand firmly in my belief that we must maintain all CDC guidance, which includes wearing masks. However, I speak before you today as a co-conspirator for racial justice. We collectively, and I say we because at that moment we were all complicit in some way, allowed for this man to say something egregious that continues to impact Asian communities across the globe. To add insult to injury, this language was used during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. On 3 separate occasions, this person used a racist term for a life-threatening virus, and not one person said anything about it. And I repeat, on 3 separate occasions, this person used a racist term for a life-threatening virus, and not one person said anything about it. Not a single board member deemed it necessary to stop the violence and abuse occurring at that moment. On June 15th. So in that video, I'm going to be completely transparent. I really was uncomfortable, but I recognized that the need was there, that if I didn't say it, no one else did. Actually, I was the only person who called them, on that. And I think about, how might that in the long run hurt not just the employees or just the community, but our students, because once something's on the internet, y'all, it's there literally forever. Who knows when that might resurface? And if you've ever seen, if those of you who are maybe on Instagram or TikTok or even Facebook, school board meeting clips a lot of times can go completely viral. And so for me, it was so important to say something about it. And so this is an example of something that's a little more direct. There's a professor that talks about calling in and calling out. This was a moment where I felt like I had to call out. But there are a lot of times where you call in and you say, hey, I want to talk to you for a moment, and you express them and call them in on it. But in this moment, it was done publicly, so the correction needed to happen publicly. And so that's kind of my belief. Let's go a little deeper. We talked about media, and this is where I want for you to kind of be reflective. And I've kind of had some conversations with my friends in New Jersey to kind of frame some of this conversation. I say to you, I think media is a very powerful tool. If you're watching this, you're watching it on some sort of social media device, Facebook. Media is a really powerful tool to advocate and to tell your story. However, you're gonna want to make sure that you do it with intention, that you do it smart. And so these are just some framing for you to consider when you're using media to tell your story. Step one, don't feed the trolls. If there's somebody that's in the comments, sharing it, maybe have something necessarily negative to say, and that this person is someone that is not going to be susceptible to anything other than what they might believe, I would encourage you just to not even engage. It's not worth your energy. It's not worth your mental health and wellness. I wouldn't even do it. The next piece is block, ban, report. I believe in the block button. Sometimes I block people that I have not personally interacted, but I see how you move and it's not for me. So you have to recognize with some individuals, you have to get to the point where sometimes you might block, ban, or report them. The next one, especially for our educators, know your privacy settings and then perform social audit. So when you tweet or when you post on Instagram or post on Facebook, know what your privacy settings are. Know, what's a friend, what's public, what's this close group, things of that nature. And then the performing social audits one is important because you are not the same person you were, I'm sure, when you first made that Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever account. So while you have grown and developed and changed, those posts that you made, stay there. So every so often, every year, maybe every 6 months, however you want to take a look at it, you may want to take a look at that social media and make sure it's reflecting who you want to be seen into the world. As educators this is one that people sometimes go either or with. I'm always intentional not to use like profanity or offensive language in my discussions, because typically I tend to get across better. As educators, one of the things you also want to consider is, even if you disagree with something, you can respond, but remain kind. Stick to the facts. Don't necessarily let emotion be what drives you in your discussion. This one is one that's hard. You got to wait sometimes before you reply. Sometimes you have to step away. Think about, when you're upset. Sometimes you got to step away, take a moment. It's really hard. I respect it. I even struggle with it. Sometimes you want to just clap back. Not always the best thing. So, wait before you reply. And then, of course, remember professionalism. Don't say anything that you're like, I would not want this screenshot and share it to the world. If it's something that you would prefer to have an inner thought or a private conversation with, I would encourage you to do so. So let's get into messaging. So anytime that you're advocating, something has to either be said or written or read or something of that nature. So words are going to be used. So let's kind of talk about what messaging is. I did see a comment about how do we bring this to locals. Please know that I will come. I have come all over the place. So please make sure that you reach out to me. You'll have my contact information. I'm happy to work with any local that might want this presentation or step 2 of this. So diving back into messaging. So this is what a message is. I won't read this to you. You can see it, but I'm going to focus in on the graphic a little bit more. And so for when we talk about messaging, please understand that everything that you say, needs to be centered around students, because those are going to be the individuals that are, ultimately impacted. And so when you have conversations and you talk about issues that you may face as an educator, you need to be reflective, going back to the previous slides, and thinking about, okay, this really does impact students. Even, for example, and this is my personal example, when I was in the classroom working as an educator, I had 3 jobs. I, of course, taught Monday through Friday. I served Friday and Saturday, and Monday through Thursday, I was a tutor. So I tutored after school. So even from a wage, a salary conversation, it still impacted students, because I want you to think, I've worked all day from 7 to maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then I would go and work an additional job. And then I would come home, wake up early, and do it all over again. Thinking about that, am I bringing my best self into the classroom every day? I couldn't be, because I was tired. And so it's important that we understand that if I'm going to bring my best self for my students, it is important that I don't have to worry about, my bills and things of that nature, and livelihood and food and all of those things that we need to be secure about, all those bottom tier foundational understandings that Maslow talks about. So with messaging, that's something that you want to think about. The next part, this is what it isn't. And to sum it up, y'all, a message isn't necessarily something that's hashtagable. And here's the reason why. Hashtags can be interpreted by different people. So what I may interpret it versus what Todd interprets it as isn't necessarily the same thing. So using buzzwords and things and hashtags, I'm not saying don't use them. They're great to connect people, but the messaging and what you're saying about it is way more significant and way more impactful. So when we think about messaging, you want to make sure that you are having that conversation of the student focus, making sure that you understand what you're talking about, and then making sure that it's not too complex, but also not too simple. Finding a happy medium. So here's some other strategies or techniques that you may want to think about when you're talking about messaging. First things first, words mean things. It's something that makes me chuckle a little bit, because I've heard it from a podcast, is what really put this thought in my mind. But you have to know kind of what you're talking about, who you're talking to, knowing your audience, and building some sort of rapport and relationship. If you know that an elected leader, if you know that some administration of some sort, has some sort of connection with you, they may have children that are around your same age, they may have pets, they may have some sort of understanding of some commonality between the two of you all, lean into that, because that's something that you all have in common, even if the issue is something that divides the two of you. If you take some time and you understand who you're having a conversation with, they're able to relate to you, they're able to have conversation with you, and it isn't like a jarring experience. So you may be serious about the issue, you may really care about the issue, but it isn't something that takes away from it, because there's a human interaction. That human to human interaction is key. These are a couple of additional strategies, and that last one is really important. A lot of times, it's not necessarily just what you say, it's how you say. My mama used to say that when I was growing up. But the last part is who is with you. When you're having the conversations around issues and things of that nature, it's important that you tap in and you understand that I have people with me that care about the same issue that we're having the discussion. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to watch this video, and it's really, really short. And there's 2 things that I'll discuss when the video wraps up. One is what they are talking about, the topic. The second is going to be how they chose to frame it.
Think back. Remember when you first started to dream? A future flowered with seeds of possibilities, opportunity, college, a life built on beliefs, not budget. Too often, our dreams are deferred by student debt. College costs soar. Politicians cut programs that help, while banks and their wealthy shareholders profit. But together, we can right those wrongs. We can imagine a new road ahead. Can you see it? A future where fate isn't determined by where you're from or the size of your bank account, but how big you dream. Join NEA to create a better tomorrow today.
So that's simple, right? They're talking about student debt. But the messaging and the conversation that is around it is super impactful because everyone at some point in life, regardless of your background, you've had a dream of some point, of some nature. And so it's important for that you find the moments that you interact and you can build rapport and relationship and the things that are, people feel and understand, and making those human to human connections are super, super, super important. Let me take it to my teacher hat, right? As an educator, they talk a lot about that students don't care how much you know, what you know, they care about how you make them feel. And a lot of students, have to like you, for lack of a better word, in order to really have a really positive experience in your classroom. And so it's important that we understand that same concept that, children may have, it translates into adulthood. All of those experiences, all of that background still stays with you as an adult. And it is so important that you make the relationships and the connections and finding the commonalities. So there are times where you may necessarily be, may be more assertive, or there may be sort of a more adversarial situation going on. But a lot of the times it truly benefits you to get to know individuals, know a little bit more about them, learn a little bit about them on a personal human to human connection. So it makes the advocacy and the messaging even that much more stronger, because it isn't just trying to butt heads. So let's revisit advocacy. Let's kind of bring the messaging in to what we discussed initially. So when we talk about advocating, I want you to put it in the frame that's presented in front of you. This frame should look familiar to you because it is essentially what every educator has done when they wrote a lesson plan. So let's make some connections. So when you prepare as an instructor, you're gathering your materials, you're figuring out, okay, who knows what? If I need to group students, how am I grouping them? I'm having a conversation with a family before the school year starts to make sure I understand more about the student. I'm having the conversation. So you're preparing. In the advocacy world, you're engaging the members and you're having conversations around their issues and what they care about. You're engaging your community. You're thinking about a goal. A lot of times, even in advocacy, where we write SMART goals, and y'all know what those are. And so I ain't explaining them. And they're going to engage the public as well. So all of those things are important because it gives you a great and sturdy and healthy foundation. You're going to go into plan. You're going to write that plan out. Talk about, what are your targets? What do you want to do? Talk about how do you want to talk about it? How are you going to engage, media on social media or in person? What's your messaging? What's the environment? Is this something that people are even ready to advocate for? Sometimes we say, this needs to change now. But if I'm the only one that cares about it enough to do anything about it, the ground isn't fertile and ready for that change to happen. Something else has to happen for that to happen. You're going to act. That's that follow through piece. Do whatever it is that you're going to say you're going to do. Collect those petitions, or you're going to show up to those school board meetings consistently, or you're going to do that campaign where you're writing your elected official. And so those are some of the pieces that you're going to do. And then, of course, that next piece is going to be to you evaluate. How did it go? Did you do what, was the result what you wanted to happen? Did those pieces work out? I reflected about it. And so I'm going to go to this next one, because when you do all of that and you get back to that evaluation, you end up in a situation where you're back preparing. While you're talking about what's happening, it's kind of, a cycle. You may have gotten what you wanted, you may have not gotten what you wanted, but ultimately it becomes a situation where you're preparing for the next thing. And so it's important that we understand that this thing works, and it doesn't always work perfectly. When you're a teacher in the classroom, every lesson that you teach does not always go perfectly. Sometimes you got to go back to the drawing board and you work it out. When you're advocating, something that you want it to happen may not happen the first time, and you're going to have to go back, have a conversation, engage some folks, see what happened, and then you prepare and you start again in a different way. So this is something that is impactful, but you also have to understand that it requires you to engage in the task, even when it feels as if you are not getting where you want to be at the rate you want to be at it, if that makes sense. So that's something to consider when you're advocating. Jumping into this next piece. These are some, that ACT part. Here are some tactics or some things that you can employ when you're advocating. The key basis of anything are relationships. They mean everything. It really is important that you have those relationships with individuals. And when I say that, I don't just necessarily mean the people or group of people who are in positions of power. You have to also have relationships with the people who are affected by that same issue. So it's not just a top down, it's a side to side piece as well. It is the long game. You have to be willing and able to kind of stick to it. If you look at any movement, if you look at the civil rights movement, those are not things that happen in one shot. It required multiple efforts, and it really, still even goes on today. I don't think that the civil rights movement itself is over. I think we're living in 2023, with it continuing. So here's some tactics. Here's the one that is the most impactful. And that one is a personal, in front of your face visit. It also makes people the most uncomfortable, but here's why it's the most effective. If I send an email, if I send a text, or if I pick up the phone and call, those things can be highly, highly effective. However, people get some plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't get it, or I missed the call, or oh this, or oh that. So what ends up happening in a personal visit, a one-on-one human interaction, it's much harder for them to ignore you. And it's much harder for them to be in a situation where they are immediately like, no. And no, you can't do this, or no, you can't have this, or no, this can't exist. And so it's important that you understand that personal visit is so important because it really creates an opportunity for you to build human-to-human interaction. Even on StreamYard, as we're on this Facebook Live, I know Todd well enough to read his facial expressions and things of that nature, but that only happened because we spent time in person. If I would have only met Todd within like a Zoom screen or through text message, understanding more about him would be something that would be a barrier. Also understanding, especially if you work in a school setting, you can't always do personal visits. So I'm not saying like that's the only way. Towards the bottom of this, here's some opportunities as far as some tactics that you can employ. You can always attend and you can speak at, school meetings and district meetings. If you are, someone who has children, check into serving on the SIC or the PTO or PTA. School board meetings. You saw an example of me speaking at a school board meeting. You don't always even have to speak. You can start off by just attending and being aware of what's going on and sharing out resources and information to your community, to your circle. And of course, committee meetings. You'll see a video in a moment from the Senate Education Committee and a testimony that happened there from someone speaking. And then here's the other one, y'all. I am not saying you have to focus on everybody, because you can't. What I am saying is focus on the people that were elected or in the capacity for you to directly work with. That's what I am saying. Find out who, in a moment, you'll have a resource to find out who your elected officials are. Reach out to them. Say, hey, I live in such and such city and you represent me. I would love to continue to have a line of communication open as you have conversations about bills. It doesn't have to be necessarily like adversarial at first. Now, understand that there are times where you have to get people together and use your collective power to take collective action. And that's what the SCEA does. But the relationship building, that rapport is super, super important throughout. So we're going to watch this video, and this video is twofold. You already saw some, a real life example of advocacy, and this will be an additional one. However, this one has a message that we'll dive a little deeper into as well. So let's take a moment and take a look at this one.
Thank you very much for the time today. I'm honored to speak before you. And one thing I hear in this room is an agreement that we all want the best for the children of South Carolina. My name is Rabbi Dr. Meir Muller. I have been an educator in South Carolina for over 30 years, and I'm currently teaching at the University of South Carolina, although today I share my own views. I agree with things that Mr. Kelly has just said, others have said, as I am against this bill as written. And instead of going over the material I prepared, I will offer a story and keep within my 3 minutes. I want to tell you of my grandmother, who was also preparing for a life in the classroom as an educator, as are both of my parents and my 2 siblings. We are all in education. And my grandmother was excited, but she lived at the wrong time in the wrong place. Because in 1938, in Austria, occupied by Nazi Germany, a Jewish woman was not destined for the classroom. She became and was forced to clean streets on her hands and knees, cleaning stones that were already clean. And she came to the United States through miraculous events and did not speak about her life. So when we ask Grandma, what are those numbers on your wrist? Silence. Grandma, why do you speak with an accent? Silence. Grandma, why don't you have any pictures of your family? Silence. Decades of silence until she was older. And almost at the end of her life, she began to share. And one of the things that my sister clearly remembers is the first thing she shared with her, as she knew we were getting ready to be teachers, is they came for the teachers first. They came for the teachers first. They told us what textbooks were allowed, what were not, what standards are allowed, what were not, and then eventually who was allowed to teach and who is not. We live in a fine state, a state that did not accept national standards. We created our own. We live in a state that has wonderful teachers, and I will say that this bill will have a chilling effect on our teachers, and we know we have 1,400 teacher vacancies right now. I teach in a classroom of students who are worried about what they will face in the classroom. So I ask you to either reject this bill or amend it, as we have heard from speakers earlier, and I thank you for the time.
So that video is a really strong example of advocacy. But more importantly, I want for anyone listening or that will be listening, that concept of they came for the teachers first, those sends chills down my body. And it's important that you all understand, and we'll talk about some first steps and some things that you can do right now in just a moment. But it's important that you understand that when I talked earlier about lives being at stake, I didn't say that lightly. You engaging in this process, you advocating, you working to do that work is essential, because students like me who kind of have some adverse childhood experiences, and really, to be quite frank, I did not grow up in the most suburban areas. Public education, I don't say lightly, it saved my life. And so as you are advocating, as you're doing this work, I want for you to make sure you're taking the time for yourself and you're making sure that your cup is full, but understanding that this work is serious and that it's something that you must engage in, and you must do it now, because you don't know what happens if you wait. And actually, I'm going to say that wrong. We do know what happens when you wait. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And so it's important that we engage, that we tap in. And here's how you can do that. The first of which is, this presentation is something that I will bring to your area, that I will work with you, that I will take you on to the next step. But that's something that we take very seriously for our members of the SCEA. So you can go to jointhescea.org, or you can tap into those resources in order to become a part of the SCEA family. Take two, couple of slides, or it might have been the last slide. We talked about getting to know your elected people. So if you go to the scea.org/ledge contact, or scan that QR code if you are not on your phone, it's important that you type in that address, and you will find everybody from the local level to the federal level that represents you along with their contact information. So tap into those resources, get to know those individuals, become someone that they understand is an educator and that is watching and that is having conversations about education and isn't just a passive entity. So those are two ways that you can kind of start this journey, do your first steps, and really grow. Which leads me to put this all together. This is not for all my English teachers. This is not like the super grammatically correct question. So we're going to let that go and give me grace on that one. When you put it all together, this is what happens. You have who, figure out who that problem is. What are the most effective tactics? What are your activities? What are your actions that demonstrate and leverage the power? Whom, who are those, key decision makers? Who do you need to be reaching out to? And these are not necessarily just the people who will make the change for or are in the position of power. These are also your community members, your fellow education employees. And so when y'all know, if we don't say when something will happen, it typically doesn't. I have some clothes that I need to fold that are laying on a couch. I need to put a win on that because I know I'm not doing it tonight. So, and then the last one is being how what are your resources that it will take in order to achieve that change? Time, your people, there may be financial pieces, maybe energy, how much time will you allot each day to a particular issue? And so when you put it all together, it's who will do what to whom, when, or how much. So I want you to kind of keep that as a frame. It's something that could support the work that you do when you're advocating. I will only, we got the time. I'm gonna play both of these. So these are what our members say about the SCEA that I think that will be impactful for you to hear, and understanding the work that we do and why it's important for that you connect, and also will fuel you in the work that you do in advocacy.
So just so much hearing from some of the other speakers, realizing that, I'm doing the right thing, even if I'm getting pushed back, and standing up for my kids is always the right thing to do. And just being here, hearing that.
So that is one of our members. And so here's another one.
What's been empowering? Going to the different sessions that I did True Colors and I did in Mindfulness as well. Knowing that there are a group of people, or we have an organization that's out there who's willing to offer these services to our schools, to our district, and that we're not in it alone. And for the most part, for teachers, we don't need a lot. We would love money, but money is not the reason why we enter this profession. Like, we just want recognition. We want somebody to know you are stressed. And here are some things you can do with just acknowledging, what we do is very valuable, and we need people to advocate for us. So this organization most definitely is an organization that really asks for it. I'm also part of the Entrepreneur Local, so that's how I know all those things. Yeah.
So those are just two of our members, unprompted conversations. This is not like an ad, but it became an opportunity for them to just speak about a conference that they attended. And, not a shameless plug, but we will be doing this Aspiring Educator and Early Career Educator conference again come April 15th. And so that information has been out. If you go to the scea.org/strongconf, CONF, you can find out more information in reference to that. So I want you to understand that this is the work we do and we do it well. And so we really appreciate and support that work for our members. And I always say we do things with you, not just for you. So these are some ways that you can take action now. We've talked about joining the SCEA family, and I would encourage you to do so. These other two resources, you have the opportunity to touch base in. The top right one is something that we do. It's called I Wish My Legislator Knew, where you can share some information, tap into some resources, but also kind of share that story. What's something that, you wish a legislator knew, like you didn't have time all day to use the restroom, or, students needing, the opportunity to move around, but the classroom I'm provided is smaller than my bedroom. And so understanding that, sharing those resources. The bottom one is our action center. I would encourage you to kind of go to the scea.org/action. You can take action on a variety of things like the censorship bill, like the voucher scheme, all of those things that exist. You can take action on by going to the scea.org/action. I would encourage you to do those things. Get connected and do that work of advocacy now. And here's the key: share it with someone else. So I've come to the end of my time. As far as presentation is considered, you have my contact information. You see it on the screen. I'm here to support and do that work. I'm excited to see how advocacy and what advocacy looks like in your locals, in your areas where you work. And at this time, I'm kind of done. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Thanks so much, Albert. That was great. That was really, really good. Very powerful and inspirational. And, one of the things that really stood out for me is thinking about advocacy from this sort of micro to macro level. And I think for people who may be just starting to get enough courage to speak out and use their voice, starting at that micro level, starting with, like, for example, we had this thing at the high school I was working at where at the end of the year, we had to get all these signatures, and we would spend like 2 days hunting down people to get these signatures, the media specialist, the custodian, all these different people. And you'd hunt them down. They wouldn't even be in their office. Then you'd have to come back and we had a huge campus. So I thought, well, this is crazy. And other teachers were complaining about it. So I went to the principal, but I had a plan and I had an idea. I said, what if we got all those people into a room at over say a 3-hour window, and we all know they're going to be there and everybody can go and get all the signatures at once. She not only didn't do that, what she did was she said, I'll tell you what, I'll go one step further. You don't have to have those things signed as long as you all agree that if there's something that needs to be done, you will come back in the summer if it's not done. If you sign off and say, I've done all this stuff, but if it's not done, you come back. So then all of a sudden we didn't have to do that anymore. And it saved us hours and hours of work. Right. And that's an example of kind of, I think, what you were getting at, which is, you can start off with a small issue like that. You don't have to necessarily, go up and testify in a subcommittee hearing in Columbia to start off with. Start off there with things that are common issues and go to your building leaders with potential solutions. Right. And that helps make the lives of your life and your colleagues' lives better. But what's great is when we can have someone who is a member of their union at each school, right, who is a representative, and then we can have all these people in the school coming together under the SCEA banner. And now you've got the backing of not only just a couple of people or yourself, you've got this group, you've got a statewide group, and you've got the NEA, so you're advocating and you have power built at your local level, your state level, national level. Leveraging that is so powerful.
It is. And having that opportunity to bring those individuals together, it will be huge. And sometimes we forget it's not just the people that are in the classroom, your ESPs, your educational support professionals that deal with all of the things that, let's be real, most certified teachers don't. It's important that, you bring those individuals into the conversation as well. So I think it's important that, across the board, we're having that conversation, we're building, that collective voice, that collective action, the collective power, and doing that work in every nook and cranny of South Carolina.
And the other word, we talked about this the other day, is solidarity. It's like things may be great at your school or in your district.
That's a big one.
But if you know of people who are suffering in another district, maybe a neighboring district or one across the other side of the state, it's our obligation not to just fight for ourselves. Like, oh, I've got everything I need and want. We've got good resources. We've got to come together and really tap into that word solidarity. Like anybody who's suffering, whether it's a bus driver or a teacher in, an under-resourced district or school, we need to be their champion too. It's not just about what happens to us as individuals, and our profession really needs to embrace that word.
Yeah, it's the culture of a lot. It's really, if we're going to be quite frank, it's American culture, that individualism culture. We need to really think about how has that served us, and how will that keep us? And so a value that we really employ is an injury to one is an injury to all.
That's
And
right.
so if any single person is dealing with a particular issue, I care about it because it could, first of all, could very easily be me, but
Yes.
also it's a situation where why would you not want for everyone to be on an equitable playing field?
And kind of going back to what that rabbi said, listen, if they can exploit people in your neighboring district, it's only a matter of time before they're going to exploit you.
Right.
So we got to stop exploitation right at its root, wherever it pops up like a game of whack-a-mole. We gotta stop it there, because
Right.
if you tolerate that, then it, like I said, it's just a matter of time before it creeps into the next district and eventually to you. So
exactly.
So thanks so much for your time, Albert. Really, really great stuff. I hope that folks, a lot of people tuning in tonight, and thanks to all the people who tuned in. Appreciate them and everything that you do, and looking forward to being at that conference with you in April.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Todd.
Thanks, man. All right, that's Albert Jones, amazing leader at the SCEA and such a great voice for the education profession. Thank him so much for his time tonight. Thank everybody looking through here tonight. We had folks from the Berkeley County Education Association. We had Stacy, Nat, Sydney, Keneal, Todd, Cindy, Bessie, Kimberly, so many people tuning in and commenting. Thank you so much for your comments. I want to remind everybody, if you would like to learn more about the SCEA, you're not currently a member, and you'd like to just learn more, you can connect with us. Just go to the scea.org/connect, put in your information. We'll reach out to you and just have a conversation about who we are and what our values are and what our benefits are and what the SCEA is all about. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, if you're interested in joining, you can go to jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744. So simple. Sign up. An amazing movement that we're building. We continue to grow and grow and grow. We've grown by well over 600 members just in the past year, and we're so proud of that growth and seeing the re-strengthening of our union. And so we want you to be a part of it. We want your voice. You know, Albert's saying it. Everybody needs to use their voice, and everybody needs to use their voice now. And there's no better way to do that than joining with us at the SCEA to build this movement to deliver the kind of schools that you deserve, that your students deserve. This is about justice. This is about protecting our public schools, because right now they are under attack. And unfortunately, I don't know when that attack is ever going to end. So we've got to come to the defense of public schools. Albert mentioned how critical public education was to him in his life. To my grandfather, if it weren't for public education, my grandfather wouldn't have been able to get an education, and I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be on this live stream right now. My mom was the first person in her family to go to a public college, SUNY Oswego in upstate New York. So she was, that was thanks to public schools, a free public education. So my 3 kids have gone to public schools. This is critical to my family, and it has been the essential thing that has helped us achieve and to succeed. And we've got to protect that institution for future generations, because it is under attack. And the SCEA is the leader in this state, and the NEA is the leader in this country in protecting the institution of public schools. So thanks so much for being a part of the movement. And if you're not, we encourage you to be a part of that movement tonight. We will not be having some live streams. I don't think. We may have some pop-up impromptu live streams, but nothing scheduled for the next week or two. We've got spring break coming up, and we do have something coming up, though, that I'm going to tease right now. We are getting ready to launch information on a mindfulness retreat for this summer that'll take place in the mountains of North Carolina. I don't have the details locked in yet, but I almost do, and we'll be announcing that. So be on the lookout through all of our social channels for information on an upcoming mindfulness retreat. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me. I'll make sure that you get that information once it's available. So without further ado, thanks so much to Albert, and thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next broadcast. Have a great week and a great weekend. Get some rest, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.